Metal Gear is probably the most interesting series in video game history. It had a big impact on video game storytelling and general game design. It has some of the most iconic characters in gaming, it has had many crossovers with other games, it's one of the best-selling game franchises, and it has one of the most well-known developers of all time. It's safe to say that this series is one of the most beloved video game series ever, and even though the creator of the series has since parted ways with the franchise, its effects are still being felt on his current games. Death Stranding, for example, wouldn't have existed without the legacy Metal Gear left on its fans. Now, the original Metal Gear Solid from 1998 is when most people jumped onto the series, but while it did kickstart what the franchise would become, it wasn't the beginning of the franchise. That all started with Metal Gear in 1987. Hideo Kojima had experience in the industry with games such as Policenauts, but Metal Gear is what elevated him. Not to the heights of Metal Gear Solid, but elevation nonetheless. What's interesting is that Konami originally rejected the idea of a stealth infiltration game as they thought the idea of avoiding enemies and combat was boring. Which makes sense at first sight when your company is mainly known for games such as Contra and Castlevania. But higher-ups played the game and realized it was actually a lot of fun to play a game in this style, and thus it got released, with Michael Biehn from the Terminator playing Solid Snake. Metal Gear was a success and got a sequel in 1990 by the name of Metal Gear 2: Solid Snake, which I will also be covering in this video. Now, while Metal Gear 1 and 2 were a success back in 1987 and 1990, it has been over 30 years since the games released. That is a long time for a video game series considering that gaming has only been around for a couple decades. So, I thought why not look back on these little games that started this big franchise. My intention with this video isn't to look back on these games with modern day standards and judge them by that, since that's kind of unfair. I will be talking about elements I like or dislike about the original games, but this is more of a look back upon the original games. After all, the standards for games back then were very different, and it would be stupid to compare Metal Gear's gameplay mechanics to, say, Metal Gear Solid 5's gameplay mechanics. So, without further ado, here's the origin of Metal Gear. So, the first game is very simplistic in concept. You're Solid Snake, and have been ordered by Big Boss to infiltrate Outer Heaven and destroy a weapon known as Metal Gear, which has the ability to launch nukes from anywhere on the planet. That's about it in terms of story. This was 1987 after all. Throughout the game you can contact Big Boss or other contacts for advice, but nothing really much happens until the end. So, let's focus on the gameplay instead. Now, as said, this is a stealth game, so the focus is on sneaking around the place and taking out guards without being noticed. This can involve knocking guards out, shooting them with a gun, preferably a suppressor, waiting for gaps in the positions to move ahead, or use a cardboard box. If you get spotted, then an alarm goes off and a bunch of guards get sent to your area and you have to either fight them all or move to a new area. And despite being very primitive, this gameplay style is quite a bit of fun, and must have been really unique back in the day. Watching where guards are looking and where they're going to, and memorizing their shifts to sneak past them, or hiding in a cardboard box to sneak past a camera or a guard whilst they're looking in that area, or just waiting to get a drop on them. It's a really fun gameplay loop. The only annoying part is that enemies respawn whenever you go to a new room, and there are some sections where there is only one correct way to go about things. But other than that, it's a simple but engaging gameplay loop. Another feature I like is the leveling up system. As you rescue more POWs, your class increases and you get more health. Which is a good idea, but the navigation in this game is a bit annoying, so finding them can be tedious. The thing I don't like about this game is how cryptic it is on where you need to go and what you need to do. I'm surprised anyone back in 1987 beat this game. I'm not gonna lie, I did need to look up some guides on how to get through certain sections. How would I know how to place pieces of C4 against specific walls to progress? It's not always this cryptic, but it is very hard to tell where you're supposed to go or what you're supposed to do. And it makes the exploration of this game really annoying. What can also be annoying is when you don't have enough resources for certain places. If you die enough times, then the game gives you a certain number of everything, but it can be annoying to go into a boss fight and not have the proper equipment. Also a minor complaint, but whenever you get a higher level keycard, you still have to sort through the previous keycards. Why would a level 2 card not have access to level 1 doors? It's tedious to sort through the inventory just to get the right card. There are boss fights, and they are pretty stock standard for the 80s. There is a specific way to beat them, and you do that. There's not really much to them. Probably my favorite part of the game is when you meet up with Big Boss and you find out he's the leader of Outer Heaven, and he sent you on this mission to kill you. Though Snake beats him and escapes the facility before it explodes. Cut to credits. It's odd to judge the quality of this game, considering that nothing like this had been done before. I mean, for example, I can say aspects of this game are really fun or really annoying, but I'm not sure how to properly criticize it on its design. By today's standards, it probably wouldn't fare well, but the game wasn't trying to live up to today's standards. It was trying to live up to the standards in 1987. And I think it succeeded with flying colours in that regard. It was a unique and interesting game with an engaging gameplay loop, and back then that was really all you needed. You didn't need a deep stealth combat system where you have 200 different ways of tackling enemies. You didn't need complex movements so the player could traverse the environment in several interesting ways. You didn't need levels so diverse they could be played through hundreds of times. You just needed a fun game. Even ignoring modern standards, I had a lot of fun playing this game. As said, the navigation and objectives are annoying, but I can't lie that the stealth gameplay is a lot of fun. Is it worth playing today though? Probably not. There isn't much story to this game, so you're not missing much by skipping it, and while the general gameplay loop is fun, some other gameplay elements may turn other players off. If you're interested in this franchise's history, then yes, of course, play it, but if you're looking for an old stealth game, I think the sequel is the better choice. Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake released in 1990 and followed on from the original game. You play once again as Solid Snake, but this time with a bandana, which would become an iconic look for the character. Anyway, Metal Gear 2's plot is similar to the first. Solid Snake is sent in to destroy another Metal Gear in Zanzibar. Right off the bat, Metal Gear 2 is a big improvement over the original game. The enemies are a lot more challenging to sneak around, as in the original they could only see in a straight line, whereas in MG2 they have a wider field of vision. They can also move from screen to screen, but in return the game has added an invasion mechanic. In the top right corner, the game shows you a map of the area and where the enemies are. When you get spotted, it shows you the alert level and how long you have until it goes to evasion. To do this, you need to break line of sight with enemies and then keep out of sight before they go back to normal. Already an improvement over the first game, since the only two options you had when you got spotted was to either fight them all or keep running until you got to an area where the game no longer registers them. So the guards are not only harder to deal with, but they're also more fun and fair to deal with. The game also has a prone mechanic where Snake lies down and crawls around, which allows him to sneak into areas such as air vents or get under tanks or crates out of sight. Plus there is this cool feature where you can play the Zanzibar national anthem and guards stop while you play it, which you can use to sneak by. However, the tape degrades every time you use it until eventually it's broken. So there are more options to sneaking around enemies thanks to the new mechanics. The level up system is here, but now you level up each time you defeat a boss. I prefer this one as it works really well for the game and helps with pacing, since you're not searching around for POWs as much. In fact, navigation is much easier in this game. It's not always clear what you're meant to do, but it is much clearer on where you're meant to go, so you're not going to be running around in circles for hours. Plus, the codec calls offer far more help than the first game, so it's not exactly impossible to figure out what to do. The levels are much more intricate and unique in MG2 as well. In MG1, most of the rooms were the same with just a color switch, whereas MG2 has different visual designs for each area to make them unique. And there are even some set pieces, such as this section where guards chase you up 30 flights of stairs with traps, or this tailing mission with a man in a green beret, or the ending. The structure feels much more locked down than the previous game. I think the bosses are far better, and while they still have the 80s thing of only having one way to beat them, it's less methodical to beat them, and a lot more of it comes from skill than knowing the exact method that works. Also, the card system is better. After collecting a couple of security cards, there will be a way to combine 3 of them into one. So for example, cards 1, 2, and 3 will be a red card, or cards 4, 5, and 6 will be the blue card. It makes it so that instead of dealing with 9 cards, you only have to deal with 3. Another thing this game does better is the story. The characters are fleshed out quite a bit, and there is some really cool story sequences, such as Snake and Grey Fox's rivalry. It's done really well and in a really cool way. Throughout the game, a mysterious person who claims to be your biggest fan guides you through the facility, and then it's revealed to be Grey Fox. He was guiding you to him. I especially love Snake and Grey Fox's battle, where Fox reveals why he respects Big Boss so much, and it adds perspective to Big Boss and why he became as well known and appreciated as he did. There is also some moments with Gustava Hefner, his lover. These moments make Snake reflect on life and its meaning and fate. And then there is the final confrontation with Big Boss, where him and Snake argue about endless war and death. This game has an actual story structure. The first game just had a context by comparison. Metal Gear 2 is an overall improvement over the previous game. It took all the cool gameplay mechanics from the first game and added even more to make the gameplay more smooth and interesting. The levels are more interesting and the guards are both more challenging and fair. The story and characters are much more developed, with interesting scenes between them. There really isn't many negatives about Metal Gear 2. I would even say the game has aged pretty well. It feels like one of the later games, but in a 2D format. The only annoying part is the navigation, as said before, can be a bit annoying sometimes, but it's much easier than the first game to figure out what to do. I would say Metal Gear 2 is still a really great game and a good entry in the series, and I'd say it's still worth playing 30 years later. After Metal Gear 2 released, Kojima-san planned on making a third game, Metal Gear 3, but after many changes that game became Metal Gear Solid, and the rest is history. History that I will be covering. Yeah, that's right. For the next few years, I will be covering the entire Metal Gear Solid series, all the way from Metal Gear Solid to Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. But what about Survive? I look forward to talking about this series, since I consider it to be the best gaming franchise of all time, and I hope I'm able to explain why. For now though, Metal Gear 1 and 2 are very interesting games, and I would definitely check them out if you're a fan of the series.